Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of the Fishing Teacher, and appreciate you guys joining me for today's episode. And guys, today we're going to be talking about the lures that are really just a waste of your time to fish. Some of these lures are really popular, but in terms of actually putting fish in the boat, they are way overrated. And I'm going to get into that in today's video, and then talk a little bit about some of the some of the baits that are the ones that you definitely do want to fish that are not a waste of time. In terms of the percentage of time that you fish them versus the percentage of fish you catch on them. So we're going to get into that in today's episode. Also, guys, got a couple things before we get started. A quick reminder that Solar Bat has got that big Black Friday sale going on. They started yesterday. If you get a pair of my RB2s or RB3 series Solar Bat sunglasses, you can get them at 50% off, guys, half off right now for the next month. So I'll put my Solar Bat link in the description of the video here. These are my RB2s. And I suggest, guys, if you just want one good lens color, get the high contrast yellow. This is a high contrast yellow that I got right here. I wear these probably 80% of the time. So Solar Bat link in the description. Also, guys, real quick, I'd like to invite everybody to please swing by Tackle Warehouse and check out my new Blaukat Throwback Power Finesse jig. Living rubber frog hair, awesome bait during the month of November, December, and January. So I'll put the Tackle Warehouse link in the description to my throwback jig. So I really appreciate you guys checking the plugs out there. Okay, let me tell you a little bit of story here that got me talking about this, or got me realizing it. Is a lot of you guys may have heard of David Dudley before. David Dudley is the all-time leading money winner on the FLW Tour. Won the Forest Wood Cup. The guy's an unbelievable angler. He's probably the most, I'm going to say that he's probably the most or the second most underrated bass fisherman in the history of the sport. And in terms of talking about the baits that are a waste of your time, there was a period of probably it's been about 20 years ago now, 15 to 20 years ago, where the big swim baits were the deal. You were hearing about guys catching 15-pound bass in California on these big 8 and 10 inch swim baits. There was a few tournaments getting won, like in California and Texas on them. They were getting a ton of notoriety. I believe that Steve Kennedy won a Bassmaster Elite Series tournament on Clear Lake on one of those big giant 10 inch swim baits. And it was sort of the rage. It was like they were the hottest thing around. Everybody was fishing them. And of course, everybody that was fishing professionally got a bunch of them, including David Dudley. And about 2 years into this trend, we were having a talk one day, and he told me, he goes, you know what, Blaukat? He goes, I took all of my big glide baits and swim baits, and he goes, I threw them in the trash can. He goes, that way I'm not even tempted to throw them. He said, I wasted so much time fishing those things and not putting hardly any fish in the boat. He goes, it was hurting me big time. So he got rid of every one of them. And guys, that's the two most baits that are the biggest waste of your time in terms of actually putting bass in the boat for you, is any type of a swim bait or a glide bait over about 6.5 or 7 inches long. Every inch that you go up in a swim bait or glide bait size, it's a huge reduction in how many bass you catch. For example, like with the Mega Bass Mag Draft here, 6 inch Mag Draft, guys, is about, in my opinion, about the biggest size that is going to consistently catch you a lot of fish. If you go down to the 5 inch size, you'll even catch any more. But if you go like to the 8 or 10 inch size, you're going to catch even less bass. They may be bigger, the ones you catch, but in terms of actually putting bass in the boat where you got your hands on the bass, if you go to a glide bait or a swim bait or even like a big topwater that is over 7 inches long, the number of bites that you're going to get are going to be reduced drastically. So in terms of being a waste of your time, as far as catching bass, the two biggest lure categories out there are big glide baits and swim baits. Now, there's a give and take with that because, you know, when you fish those big baits out there, you may not be after a bunch of bites. You know, you're trying to catch a big fish. But it's been my experience in fishing those really big baits out there, you know, especially the ones over 8 inches long. It's basically like I'm just out there casting. You know, it's like once in a while I'll see a big one follow it or something like that. But rarely do I get one of them to bite. I can occasionally, but in terms of how many hours I spend doing it versus how many hours a bass actually bites them, they're just the two biggest waste of times that you're going to have. Okay, let me talk about the two lures that are not the biggest waste of your time as far as putting bass in the boat and, the time that you spend throwing those lures. You're going to catch a bunch of fish. And that is without a doubt, there's not even two lures close, and that is a shaky head and a wacky rig. A shaky head worm, like a 4 or 5 or 6 inch long shaky head worm on a little 1/16 of an ounce head, shaky head, is going to get you a bunch of bites. It'll even catch some good fish. And a wacky rig is freaking deadly in shallow water. Any type of a wacky rig, soft plastic stick bait, a wacky rig like a Zoom trick worm wacky rig, something like that. The percentage of bites that you get versus the hours that you fish those two baits are through the roof. It's completely on different ends of the spectrum. You got the shaky head up here, you got the big glide baits down here. So a lot of it in bass fishing just depends on what your expectations and your wants and your desires are in the sport. You sort of have to make that determination. But if you're one of those people that are determined to throw those big baits, there's a couple different things. I'll give you some tips and advice here. First of all, you have to be on a body of water that has big ones in it. If you're not fishing like in California or Texas or Florida, there are very few lakes out there where you're going to get many bites at all on them. It's going to be very tough to get a bite on a really big swim bait or a glide bait unless you're fishing those 3 states there. So that's simply because they got a lot more bigger fish in it. That's the number one thing. Number two thing out there is if you're going to dig your heels in and continue to fish those things, you have got to make a commitment mentally and physically to fishing them, because you can't take one of those big baits and throw it for 20 minutes and get tired of throwing the thing and put it down. You'll never do any good on it. Every person I've known that have had decent success with those giant baits, they take one rod in the boat with them and a couple big glide baits and a couple big swim baits, and they don't even have anything else in the boat. They're forced to fish it all day long. So you have to make that commitment. And it is a commitment, because those things, even though you don't have to put a lot of action on them, some of them weigh up to 6 ounces, so it's like throwing a dang rock in the water, and it'll wear you out at the end of the day fishing them on an 8-foot rod, which is what you need to fish them on. So that's sort of like, it's one of those deals where it's not for everybody. But in terms of just getting a lot of bites and something that you're going to have a good time fishing, try to really master that wacky rig and shaky head fishing. If I could give you guys one piece of advice in bass fishing that's going to help you catch a lot more fish, is to become a student of those 2 lure categories. Try to figure out the different head sizes on the shaky head. Try to figure out the different worm sizes, the worm profiles, the worm colors. Learn how to skip the thing, like up underneath boat docks, something like that. It's a really good way to catch them. And the same with a wacky rig. Experiment with colors and worm profiles and worm sizes, and the places that you want to fish those in, because those are 2 baits that will catch bass all year long. Shaky head more than a wacky rig. Wacky rig is usually better once that water temperature is over about 55 degrees. But those are 2 baits that'll catch them. I don't care what lake you are in the country. Literally every single lake, if it has a bass in it, you're going to catch some fish on those 2 things without a doubt. You can't say that about the big swim bait and the glide bait. So anyway, guys, just a little bit of information there if you'd like to know about it. I appreciate y'all tuning into the video. We'll check in later. See you.